Hi everybody, welcome to another episode of my Bottom Shelf Vinyl Voyage. It's been a little while since I've done this. Don't worry if you've not seen the previous episodes, they can be watched in any order. But what this is, I'm on a mission at the moment to listen to, in order, all of the bottom shelf of my vinyl shelving, which is all my non-Beatles related vinyl. Purely because sometimes we buy these things, they don't get played, they get forgotten about, and we've spent a lot of money on them. So I'm trying to make sure that I do everything on that bottom row, and in previous videos I've gone up to the start of the letter L, and here I'm going to show you a few more albums that I'm going to be doing during this voyage. I'm also going to be just covering a few little bits of news items that you may not have heard about. Some of them you probably have heard about, but I might just sort of have a bit of info or opinion for you on that. So I'm going to just slot that in throughout the video. So here we go with... We finished the last video on LCD Sound System American Dream, which was actually my personal album of the decade for the last decade, and I said we would start this video with Led Zeppelin. So here we go, this is the first Led Zeppelin album. I do like Led Zeppelin. I've got to be in the mood for them though. I find the bluesiness can get a little bit too much for me sometimes, but if I'm in the mood, I'm really going to enjoy it. Obviously, loads of classic songs on the first album. It doesn't give me a great deal of information on here about what pressing this is, but it's I think it's the standard one. I bought this a few years ago, and it would just be the whichever version was sort of mainly on the shelves at that time. The only other Led Zeppelin album that I've got on vinyl is the second one. I've got all the studio albums on CD, but for vinyl, just the first two. This is a superb pressing. I think this was from about 2014, if I remember rightly. Over 2 LPs, and this sounds absolutely fantastic. Again, it's one of the I think it's one of the remastered by Jimmy Page versions. Yes, it is. And this sounds great. This has probably got my favourite Led Zeppelin song on it as well, Ramble On. Always been my favourite. Will I pick up some more Led Zeppelin on vinyl? I might get Led Zeppelin 4, for want of a better name to give it. Probably I won't get any others, I don't think. There's a few of them that I'm not too bothered about. I've never got into Physical Graffiti, for example. Moving on next alphabetically, the Lemon Twigs, Go to School. This is their second album from 2018. I've talked various times about the Lemon Twigs. I do genuinely think they are the best band in the world at the moment. This was their second album. They were still, I think Michael there might have still been a teenager at the time. His brother Brian, early 20s. Fantastic concept album this, and a strange concept as well. All about a couple who can't have children, so they adopt a chimpanzee, call him Shane, and he tries to adjust to living in the human world, and eventually it all goes very, very badly wrong. Absolutely fantastic album. If you like sort of early 70s rock, things like Queen, Mott the Hoople, 70s style Beach Boys, that kind of thing, there's a lot for you to love on here. And there's a guest appearance from Todd Rundgren on this album as well, which is pretty good. But it's a fantastic album. I really love that. Like I said, I do think they are genuinely the best band in the world at the moment. This is an album that came out last year from them. This is called Everything Harmony. In fact, they've got another album coming out in another month or two. This is a real sort of mixture of styles. Some of it sounds like Simon and Garfunkel bookends. Some of it sounds like Pet Sounds era Beach Boys. You've got songs that sound like the Lars on here. It's really got a range of music on here, but fantastic. This was one of my top 2 albums of last year. Really, really good and well worth checking out if you've not heard that. Before we come on to the next one, I said I was going to cover various bits of news during this video. So the first one is, this one's flown a little bit under the radar. Some of you will have heard about this. But the Denny Laine album, Holidays, from 1977, is looking like it's going to get a re-release. So this was an album that was made pretty much straight after the Wings Over America tour. It features 3 people on the album: Denny Laine, Paul McCartney and Linda McCartney. So if you're a Paul McCartney fan, it's an album that is definitely worth checking out. Although I'm going to admit, I've never actually heard it. I have never heard Holidays. It's not an easy album to get hold of. I imagine it's on YouTube, but if I'm going to listen to it, I want to listen to it properly. But before Denny passed away, he had instigated the chance of having a re-release of the Holidays album. He wanted to get it back out there. And Denny's widow had confirmed recently that Denny had been in touch with Paul McCartney to say that he was interested in doing this, and Paul was fully supportive. He was all over it because it's an MPL Communications release. I don't know whether they still own the ownership of the album. I guess they probably do. But it looks like that project's underway now, and at some point we should get an announcement of a re-release of the Holidays album. So I will certainly be getting that. I'll be very interested to hear that. So I've got a few other bits of news I'll cover as we go through. But carrying on with the Bottom Shelf Vinyl Voyage, we've got from 1967, Love Forever Changes. I mean, this is one of those albums that when you think of the summer of love, this album would probably spring to mind, even though I don't think this album came out until the back end of 67, so it would have missed the summer of love. But certainly it's a great album for that time period. On here, there's always been about half the songs that I really enjoy, and there's another half that I'm just really not too bothered about at all. So obviously things like Alone Again or House Is Not a Motel, Maybe the People Would Be the Times, Bummer in the Summer, some great songs on there. Some of the others I'm not too fussed about. This is a really nice pressing, a 45th anniversary Rhino vinyl. It's one of those, I wanted to buy it once and not have to buy it again. Now, I know that there are better pressings out there than this, but to be honest, for me, this is good enough. I'm happy to stick with that. I've had it on CD for 10-15 years, but just got that a couple of years ago and really happy with it. Here's an album that is, like many of these, one of the great reasons why I want to do this Bottom Shelf Vinyl Voyage of playing every album along on this shelf, because this is one that's not had a fair outing, I think, by me. John Martin, Solid Air, from I think about 1973. Yes, 1973. I bought a digital collection of all John Martin's Island Records albums many years ago, and I really like the early, his earliest albums from the late 60s, very sort of gentle, folky, acoustic kind of stuff. By this point, it had got a lot more like prog folk. This is beyond just normal folk music, and it's a really impressive album, but one that I haven't played enough. What I would be interested in, if anybody out there knows a lot about John Martin, I've covered his career up to and including this point, but I've never really listened to many of the albums beyond. So if you've got any recommendations of albums that came after Solid Air that you think I should go and check out, please let me know. If it's one of the Island Records albums, I've probably got it digitally, so I can certainly go and have a listen to that. Next up, can you tell what that is by looking at the cover? This is called Music Complete by New Order. I had to have a look at the spine there because I was getting a bit mixed up between Music Complete or Complete Music. It's called Music Complete. This is from about 8 or 9 years ago, and again, another reason for this voyage. I haven't played this enough yet, apart from one song on here called Plastic, which is fantastic in plastic. It's, picture yourself down at the Hacienda in Manchester on a rave night and crank it up loud, and it is superb. But other than the song Plastic, I've not really had any of this ingrained in my mind yet, so I really need to spend some more time with this album. And probably some of the early 80s New Order albums as well. I've listened to them a fair bit, but I really ought to spend a lot more time with them. Just because some people get offended by stuff. I've put the sticker in an appropriate place here. This is Nirvana, Nevermind. Obviously one of the all-time most important albums probably that's ever been released. In the same way that Oasis changed the UK in the 90s, I imagine this had a similar effect in America. Smells Like Teen Spirit, the opening song, I would imagine is, it's one of those generation defining songs. There's not many more important songs, I think, than that. Certainly not over the last 35, 40 years. Absolutely fantastic. I know it might be the sort of mainstream thing to say, but for me, this is the album for Nirvana for me. Things like Bleach, In Utero, I think I can pick and choose a few songs from each of those, but Nevermind is the one that really just captures me. Things like Come As You Are, Lithium, Polly, fantastic. And it's only just in the last 2 or 3 years that the last song on here, Something in the Way, really grabbed me, and I realised just how fantastic that song is as well. But such an important album, and it sounds superb, does that pressing. Coincidentally, I'd mentioned Oasis there, and alphabetically next is definitely Maybe, the first album from Oasis. Oasis, this might be a surprise to some people, but in many ways, Oasis are a more important band to me than the Beatles, even. Just for, I wasn't there when the Beatles happened. Obviously, I love it, and I've spent so much of my time learning about it, listening to it, and it really been a part of me. But Oasis, I was there, and this first album is just absolute genius, start to finish, absolutely fantastic. I do intend to pick up the other Oasis albums on vinyl at some point. I've got everything they ever released on CD. I've got a ridiculous Oasis CD collection that I might go through one day. If that's of interest, let me know. If I think there's interest out there, I'll do that. But for vinyl, this was the reissue from 2014, and it's got a lot of weight to it that the CD just hasn't. I was really sort of blown away the first time I played that, just how different it sounded to whenever I'd heard the album before. And I've got all my Noel and Liam stuff sort of filed alongside Oasis. So next up, we've got Noel's first solo album from Noel Gallagher's High Flying Birds. This was an album that I think a lot of us as Oasis fans have been waiting for such a long time, going right back to the early days of Oasis, and especially when Noel did the MTV Unplugged, when he sang that when Liam, for whatever reason that night, decided not to. There's been this thought of like, oh, what could a Noel Gallagher solo album be like? And we finally got to find out in 2011. And it's got some beautiful songs on it, some of which were songs that Oasis had done and demoed, and I've got those Oasis demos of, and others that were brand new for this. But songs like If I Had a Gun, Dream On, The Death of You and Me, aka What a Life, just it's packed with great songs. This is one of those albums where I would say that it's packed with absolutely fantastic songs start to finish, even if it tends to get overlooked a bit as an album as a whole, but really seriously good. This was Noel's latest album, Council Skies, that came out just under probably early last summer. I'll show you this one because it's a funky looking piece of vinyl. Look at that. That's pretty cool. How's that? Now, I'm starting to become a bit less interested in what Noel and Liam are doing. I've still yet to muster any enthusiasm for the Liam and John Squire album that's coming, but who knows? I might love it. We will see. But I'm sort of getting out of it a little bit now. But still, there's some great songs on this. Pretty Boy's really good. Dead to the World, the third song on here, was one of my absolute favourite songs from last year. So, when Noel gets it right, I think he's still doing some great stuff. But it's maybe not grabbing my attention as much as it used to do. A little bit more news before we go on to the next one. If you've not heard it yet, Sean Lennon has got a new album out called Asterisms, which I've had a couple of listens to, and I'm really enjoying that. It's very much psychedelic, funky, instrumental jazz. It's credited to him and various other musicians who I can't remember the name of any of the other musicians offhand, but they've come up with a great album here, Asterisms. It's very chilled. It reminds me in places a little bit of Paul McCartney's Rush's, the Fireman album. It reminds me in places a bit of King Crimson in the Court of the Crimson King, but really interesting album, and I would definitely recommend having listened to that. It just came out a couple or so weeks ago. Really good. Anyway, next up is Liam Gallagher, Why Me, Why Not? I think this was his second album. Was it his second album? Solo album in terms of after BDI had finished. And there's some really good songs on here. I think for a while Liam was absolutely winning whatever battle there was between Liam and Noel. I think Liam was winning it, and there's some cracking songs on here. One of them that I would definitely point out is a song called Once. Fantastic song. And the video is well worth checking out if you've not seen it. So it features Eric Cantona, footballer, and it's set at Tittenhurst Park, John Lennon's old home, and it starts in the room where the Imagine video was made. You know, that big room where, you know, where Yoko's opening up all the curtains while John's on the Steinway piano, and it features Eric Cantona as kind of sort of the king of the castle, the lord of the manor. It starts in that room, and you see like a single track shot of Eric Cantona going from this room, going through Tittenhurst Park, through the various corridors and other rooms, out onto the steps, and then it sort of cuts back and you see the view of the house that really hasn't changed that much since all that film of it in the early 70s. So yeah, the video for Once is well worth checking out from this Liam Gallagher album, if you are a John Lennon fan. Next up, Tubular Bells, Mike Oldfield. I mean, what another just huge album from the 70s. I love side 1 of this, absolutely adore it. Side 2, I've never been as bothered about side 2. I think it all gets a little bit, I don't mind a bit of strange, it all gets a bit very strange on side 2. But side 1, starting off with the piece that of course then became known as the Exorcist theme, and the way that it goes through just all different styles and speeds and such like, and you end up with the Viv Stanshall section where he's introducing the various elements of the orchestra. Side 1 is just something that I could just play lots, and I do play it quite often. I really enjoy that. We've then got this. This is a 12-inch. Well, obviously it's a 12-inch. It's not really a full album. It's kind of a collection of remixes from the late 80s, probably from about 88, I think. Yes, it is 88. Introspective by the Pet Shop Boys. And really, I bought this for one reason and one reason only. Always on my mind in my house there. So you'll probably be familiar with the Pet Shop Boys cover of Always on My Mind, which was fantastic. Brilliant single. But when it gets to the remix version, that's about 9.5 minutes long, it is just stunning. It's probably one of my favourite cover versions of all time, I would say. The way that on this 9-minute version, it's got a chance to sort of ease its way in, and it teases you that it's going to explode and go into this massive chorus, and then it just sort of holds back from it. And then it teases you again, and then eventually when it does explode into the massive chorus, it's just majestic. I absolutely love it, and yeah, I would say one of my favourite cover versions of all time. We've then got two copies here of Pink Floyd, Piper at the Gates of Dawn, mono and stereo versions basically. So I'd bought this one first. This was the stereo version that came out 2016. It's got Bernie Grundman on there, who was involved in the remastering and of this, so that's generally a sign of great quality. I wanted to see how it would compare on mono. This version came out maybe a year or so back. I think on balance, might not be the cool thing to say, but I probably prefer it in stereo. Overall, I think some of the elements of it just to me stood out a little bit more on the stereo version. But it's always fun to play the stereo and then have a play of the mono and just see how they compare, because that's an era of Pink Floyd that I really enjoy. And one of my favourite albums of theirs is this one, Medal. It's just pull out. Oh, I mean, look at this gatefold for starters. What a cracking gatefold that is. But this album has got various songs on it that I just really enjoy. So it's obviously got Echoes on side 1, the sort of 20-odd minute epic, and then we're going to the regular songs on side 2. And you've got there's Fearless on here, which is a song that I really enjoy, and it's quite funny that one of my sort of favourite bands who came along in the 90s, the Charlatans, they've been known to really, should we say, borrow from the Heroes over the past. They've got a song called Here Comes a Soul Saver that just completely takes the guitar riff from Fearless. They've done it with John Lennon stuff as well. But anyway, that's getting off topic a little bit. But this is one of my favourite Pink Floyd albums, definitely. There's a few Floyd albums that just are probably never going to grab me. I've tried with the Animals album. I just don't get it at all. Division Bell bores me to tears. But when they get it right, they just got it so right. Which, of course, they did on Dark Side of the Moon. This was... I remember I paid out no money at all for this because I got it with Tesco club card vouchers back in the days when they were doing vinyl. I don't really need to say anything about Dark Side of the Moon, do I? You all know it probably far better than I do. It's a classic album for a reason. If it's been overplayed... It was overplayed for a reason, because it's so damn good. This was a remaster that came out, I think about 2016. Beautiful sounding album. I don't need to buy Dark Side of the Moon on vinyl again, because that's good enough for me. As well as the various high-res digital versions that I've got that just sound great as well. I bought this fairly recently, just a few months ago, Wish You Were Here. And obviously... great, the song Wish You Were Here, Shine On You Crazy Diamond. I would say this is, outside of my favourite albums by Pink Floyd, which of course would be Dark Side of the Moon, Medal, Piper at the Gates of Dawn, I'd probably put this next as a favourite of mine. But again, this is from the same campaign as the Dark Side of the Moon that I've got, so it's similar kind of credits. But really nice sounding version of that. So because all I did have was probably a 30-year-old CD that was good, but it certainly it had some room to be improved on, and that vinyl certainly does. I'm just going to do a little bit more news. These are some things that you will have heard of, probably, but just in case there's anybody out there who hasn't. Record Store Day coming in April. John Lennon has got a Mind Games EP coming out, which is surely going to be a teaser, a precursor to the Mind Games Ultimate Edition box set that's going to come later on in the year. We thought it was coming in June, and there's no official word to say that is or isn't happening, but the standalone book that's going to be released, which they've also done for Plastic Ono Band and Imagine, really, really good standalone books, that was due to be released in June. That's been put back to about, I think, back end of September now. So whether or not there's going to be a delay to the Mind Games Ultimate Edition box set, don't know yet. As soon as I know anything, I will bring that news to you, of course. But the Mind Games EP should be interesting. It will have some things on it that will definitely be a taster for that box. It's got John Lennon vocal version of I'm the Greatest, which of course was the song that he wrote for Ringo, for the Ringo EP. Whether it's going to be the same version of I'm the Greatest that appears in the, I think it's the anthology box, which I've got up there. Don't know yet, but we shall see. But that's coming out soon. As is for Record Store Day, Ringo's got a new EP. Yes, another EP, Crooked Boy, that's coming on Record Store Day. But Ringo's got a full album out. And again, I'm sure most of you know this by now, but it'd be really interesting to see what Ringo's full studio album is going to be like. We know it's going to be a country album. He was going to do an EP, but it sounds like they just were really enjoying and presumably liking what they were doing in the studio. It's become a full album. We thought that Ringo was done with that. But I can't imagine that he would do this unless he thought that had actually gone really well and the results were worth having a listen to. So definitely looking forward to that. And the other big news, of course, this week, unexpectedly, Beatles biopic. Not just one, or two, or three, but 4 of them. Going to be directed by Sam Mendes, who's done Bond films and all sorts of things. Focusing on one from the perspective of each Beatle. So there'll be a John, a Paul, a George and a Ringo film, giving their perspective of what? Well, we don't know yet. We don't know what time period these movies are going to cover, which I think is going to be really interesting when we find out what that is. Is it going to be covering the Beatlemania period and just sort of saying how that went from Ringo's perspective, from Paul's perspective? That'll be something we've never really seen, because you know everything seems to be from the perspective of the four of them, from those from that kind of era. I can't imagine that it would be a movie or four movies covering the breakup, because Apple politics, I can't imagine them going down that road of covering that era, because what kind of wounds would that open? You know, if Ringo says something from his perspective about the breakup and Paul doesn't agree with it, or George's camp don't want him to say that, I could see that getting really messy. So I'm sure they'll focus on some less controversial period of the Beatles' career. But it'd be really interesting to see what news comes out about that over the years. I think it's 2027 they're due to be coming out, but you know, these things can slip. We will see. Very interesting anyway. Anyway, back to the last few albums. I've got 3 left to cover. Pink Floyd again, Dark Side of the Moon, live at Wembley 1974. This came out around about October. I think it was about the same time as the Beatles' Red and Blue was re-released. If you are any kind of a fan of Dark Side of the Moon and you've not heard this album yet, I would really, really recommend you give this a go. Superb. And the main thing that struck me listening to this was, you know, it's 1974. It's obviously a few years. Well, it's 8 years after, for example, the Beatles stopped touring. So it's a decent chunk of time. But in the grand scheme of things, it's a fairly short time period afterwards. And just the difference in where sort of stadium shows were at in the 60s compared to what they'd come to in 1974 is just apparent right from the off on that album. So it's really well worth listening to. Okay, 2 left. Coincidentally, both from 1988. But other than that, there's probably no other similarities between these 2 albums. This is Surfer Rosa by the Pixies. This was an album that I didn't know at all until a few years ago. I was round at my friend Stuart's house. Hello, Stuart, if you're watching. And he played us this, and I think about halfway through I was on Amazon ordering it. I thought, I've got to have this. But I ordered the CD then, got the vinyl a little bit later on. So from 1988, and what I really like about this is if you compare what else was going on in American rock music at the time, this is new, this is fresh. If you compare to, you know, what was happening with Bon Jovi and bands like that, which was all sort of, to my mind, sort of silly poodle head rock, and this is like the new way. This is paving the new way forward, a little bit like sort of punk and new wave had done 10 years earlier. This was doing a similar thing. Some great songs on here, such as Bone Machine at the start. Where Is My Mind is a classic song, absolutely fantastic. Tony's theme I really enjoy, Vamos. But I've still got quite a bit more I can learn about that album, so it's definitely a good one for this Bottom Shelf Vinyl Voyage. And the last album, we're finally at the last album of this episode. I'll be carrying on from this point onwards in the next one. This is a really important album for me, The Proclaimers' Sunshine on Leith. Now, if I could sort of tot up how many different calendar years I'd listen to a particular album, you know, like I've listened to it in that year. This is probably right up there. I've probably not listened to many albums more often over a period of years than this. Sgt. Pepper probably, but this just gets regular outings all the time. Fantastic album. It's people will laugh at things like I'm Going to Be 500 Miles, but it's a great song. You've got a song called I'm On My Way, which was used really well in the original Shrek film. There's songs on here that have taught me a lot. I'm not going to take an opinion one way or the other on things like Scottish independence, because that ain't my battle to fight. But, you know, I've certainly learnt a point of view about something like that from this album. And it's just cracking songs all the way through about things like what it's like to be Scottish, what it's like to go out and have a fight on a Saturday night, and their songs about them basically trying to get girls. It's just a cracking album, and I really love it. And that's where I'm going to leave this particular episode. Let me know what you think about any of these albums that you've seen on here. I will be back with news as it comes on any sort of releases that I want to talk about. And I'll carry on from The Proclaimers onwards in the next episode of this. Thanks very much for watching. Bye.